All right, hello everyone. My name is Paige Moreau, and I want to welcome you all to Museums a la carte and the first installment of Stories from the Outwin, a free 4-part lecture series that through conversation will explore the lives and work of artists featured in past and present Outwin portrait competitions. Now, please enjoy today's program, Everyday People, a conversation between portraitists, and I'll let the 3 panelists introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Paige. It is a pleasure to be here. My name is Taina Caragol, and I'm curator of painting and sculpture and of Latinx art and history at the National Portrait Gallery. I had the pleasure of co-curating the current Outwin American Portraiture Today that is right now on view at the Damour Museum of the Springfield Museums with Dorothy Moss, director of the Outwin Buchiver Portrait Competition in 2019. And I am absolutely delighted to be moderating this conversation today between 2 Outwin finalists of different iterations, though, 2016 and 2019. I will let them introduce themselves in a minute. Before that, I would like to acknowledge that I am speaking from Washington, D.C., from the native lands of the Piscataway, the Pamunkey, Nacotchtank, and their descendants, and my respect and gratitude to them for letting us work from here. John, Devon, why don't you introduce yourselves, please?
Hi, Taina. Devon, how are you doing this morning?
Hi, I'm doing
good. This is John Ahearn, and I'm the older artist here. And it's been my privilege to know Devon for the last several years, and I've learned so many things from him, and I'm delighted to be sharing this talk with him.
Devon.
Same. So my name is Devon Rodriguez. I'm an artist from the South Bronx, where I met John, and yeah, I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. It's really such a treat to be in conversation with you too. And it really speaks to the power of the Outwin Buchiver Portrait Competition, a competition that really brings forward the power of portraiture to connect people, to speak about their different experiences, to honor those different experiences. The next competition, the next iteration of the competition, which will have its show in 2022, is currently open. Our call for entries is open until February 5th. And if you're an artist interested in entering your work, please visit portraitcompetition.si.edu to see the rules and to access the entry platform. I should say that we have a fantastic panel of jurors for the next iteration with Kathleen Ash-Milby, curator of Native American art at the Portland Art Museum, art critic and poet John Yao, photographer Catherine Opie, and multimedia artist Ebony Patterson. And I have the privilege of directing that next iteration and of co-curating the show with my colleague, Dr. Leslie Ureña, curator of photographs at the Portrait Gallery. And this competition is really a wonderful gift to the nation that was given by Virginia Outwin Buchiver, who was a docent at the Portrait Gallery for almost 20 years, and who in 2006 endowed this competition as a gift to the nation. She was familiar with many portrait galleries around the world and their competitions, and she knew that there was that kind of event missing in the United States. So she made possible the competition, and we're grateful to her and to her children for continuing her legacy. I'm really delighted to be here today with John and Devon because they're 2 artists I greatly admire for their dedication to portraying everyday people and also for what their work says about city life in New York City. I lived in New York for many years between 2001 and 2010. And actually, John and I were neighbors just by chance. And it happens to be that we have also some other connections. And I very much admired his artistic practice, which goes back to 4 decades, and which brings visibility to the people who shape New York City communities. And I came into contact with Devon's work through John's work, because there's this wonderful story of reciprocity and friendship among them that expressed itself in the Outwin. In 2016, John became a finalist in the Outwin with a portrait of Devon. And I'm going to show it here. It's actually not a portrait, but 2 portraits. It's called the Rodriguez twins. And in 2019, Devon became a finalist in the portrait competition with a portrait of John. So it's quite extraordinary. I think it's a beautiful testament to an intergenerational, relationship, to inspiration, to the inspiration that you draw from each other. And I would love to start our conversation by going there to that moment when you decided to create those portraits. First, of course, your portrait of Devon, John, and when you decided to enter it into the portrait competition.
Well, I always have thought about my entering the competition as actually something that Devon and I were doing together in collaboration. From the beginning, we talked about putting the work, the portrait in there. And I even think maybe we had it in mind when we were first doing the cast. I don't know if Devon will go along with that part of the story, but that's how I remember it almost together, that we were going to put this in. And from the, we have history earlier on that I was going to talk about, having to do with seeing Devon first down the block at the portrait show that he had organized, and also decades before that doing work at Fashion Moda. So they're part of what we're looking at here. It's hard to know how to say what first, but I feel like we put it in together. I put my name in because only one artist was supposed to do it, and I thought it would be me. But actually, both, if you can see both sculptures there, they were both loaned. They were loaned, one by me and one by Devon, because every time I do a sculpture, usually it's, I have one I make for the person with the assumption that they want one. And then one is for myself in for my own satisfaction as an artist. So really, Devon had loaned his version to the Outwin show. And but we had to say it was coming from me, just to simplify the red tape and things like that. Mm-hmm. So Devon had to wait for all those years while it was traveling all over the place to get his cast back.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that you had to part with the sculpture for some time, Devon. And when we were preparing for this talk, John, you mentioned we were talking about the concept of the twins.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Well, I was born an identical twin and still am an identical twin with Charlie Ahearn. And so in a way that there's, in a way, seeing the way the two casts look reminds me of the feeling of being a twin, because these two casts of Devon were done individually, separately. Each one was a separate experience casting for him and for me. So I think that they do look individually different. If you actually examine them, the expression changes a little bit between one and the other. So the other thing was that I was thinking very competitively about this show, the Outwin, and I was thinking, I better put both of them in, because it's such a small cast. I need to be able to have take up some wall space.
Mm-hmm.
Because
so there's a practical concern there. Yes.
Small cast. So I said, they're only life size. Why don't I, now that I see other pictures on the wall on the other side, I see that I maybe I didn't need it. But so I was making a little bit of a humor about to call it the Rodriguez twins.
I love that. What was your reaction, Devon, did you ever expect to have a twin as a sculptor?
No, I didn't, but I loved it, and I remember it on the left, and yeah, I had to loan it. I was actually dorming at FIT when I first got it, so I had it up in my dorm, and all my friends thought like it was super creepy, but it was a prized possession, so I had to keep it up.
That's wonderful. Why don't we talk about your portrait of John, Devon? What was the process of making it and of submitting it?
So John's studio is like this huge inspirational place with plaster everywhere, all over the chairs, table, floor, everywhere, walls. And he always had plaster all over his shirt. And every time he was working, I would be like around watching, and he'd be like showing me like, look at this. And then I don't know, sometimes like I'll help him like do small things, but for the most part I'll be afraid. Like he was working on a cast of me, and he wanted to cut off the arm, and he's like with this big saw, and he's like so like not afraid, like do it, like, and I'm like, wait, that's like a knife. Anyway, he's very like intense while he's working, so I wanted to capture. I remember sometimes he would have like this expression on his face in the painting for like a split moment. Sometimes, you know, like looking at the work, like, this one's not good. Like he was always very intense about it. So I wanted to capture that look with the plaster all over his. So I always had that in mind. So one day I wasn't like busy or anything. So I called him. I'm like, hey, I want to do a portrait of you. All I need is a photograph. I did it from a photograph. Like I was like, I got to come to your studio. And he's like, I'm working right now. I'm like, it's okay. It's only going to take like a minute. Like, he's like, all right. So he's like working, and you know, I just told him like, stand like this, have that intense look this way. And it took me like, I only had like, he was working, so I only had like, I don't know, like 20 seconds to get it. So it took me like 3 tries before I got this one. And I was like, all right, this is the one. And then I took it home, and I painted it and stuff. And then I actually did submit in 2014, but I didn't get in. I was like, you know what, I'll try again in 3 years. So I tried again in 3 years, and this one became a finalist. And I just thought it was great that his was a finalist, and then, you know, mine of his got in.
And did you have, when you were making this portrait, did you know this was going to be the work that you would submit to the Outwin?
I don't remember if I knew this was probably, but I actually don't remember.
I just love its intensity, and the fact that it's very painterly. You know, the background has so much texture. There's so much psychological depth to the work, and also there are the traces of John's sculptural practice, as you said, in his clothes. John, what was your reaction to this portrait, and how did you feel about it being submitted to the Outwin?
I'm amused that it was going to the Outwin competition, but I didn't like my portrait because I don't like those blue eyes. You know what I mean? I got so they're too blue. You know what I mean? So it's just it's one of those things these days, and so I tolerate it, and I love Devon's painting so much, and wait till we see the rest of his. You see some of the work that he did in the subways, and he did this amazing portrait of Jerome. That's another subject that we probably won't get into, but the great thing is that he's going to be able to still own this painting when he's done. His aunt won't get her hands on it. It's a joke. All right.
Oh my God. I think the thing with the blue eyes, I think I exaggerated them slightly because he has like big natural light in his studio, like these big tall windows, and like the light would go into his eyes, and they would like be blue to me, but I intensified it. You know, he wasn't a fan, but it's okay. We'll go to the next slide.
Let's go to the next slide. Yes, let's talk about how you became friends. I imagine there's something special to the experience of being an artist and meeting another artist who works in the same genre as you do, but in a different manner, but really digging that artistic expression, really, and identifying with it from the moment you see it. So can you talk about how that happened?
Is it Devon or John that you're asking the question?
Well, perhaps you, John, right? Because you saw Devon's work.
I saw an email announcing this portrait show that was a New York City high school portrait show. And I thought, oh my God, this is like those Golden Key Awards or something like that. You know, it sounded so exciting to me. And I went to the opening, and when I came in, I saw this painting, and I was quite shocked at how fine it was and how accomplished it was. It was amazing to me. And I got to meet Devon, and we had some, artist to artist kind of like little repartee, and agreed that he would come visit my studio.
Devon, do you remember that moment when you met?
Yeah, of course. So he got invited to the show. I turned at this gallery, and the director was Linda Cunningham, and I was just like the receptionist at the desk, and I always asked her like, hey, could I have a show here? And she's like, most of these I was only like 16 or 17. I think I was 16 when I started, and then I became 17, and I would always ask her like, can I please have a show here? She's like, these are all like working professional artists and stuff. Like maybe one day, she would like brush it off and stuff. But I would always ask her like, what about this show? Like, did you think about it? So one day towards the end of the year, around the summer, she came to like this senior art show at my high school. And she saw my work, and she saw a few friends, and she was like, wow, your work is really impressive. Let's do like a show with like you and these 3 others that I like from your class. So we had that. She was like, but only for a weekend, like it's like I'm still in the little league. So I was like, all right, that's cool. The weekend. She was like, but I'll invite. She was like, we'll have a real opening though. You could bring your family. I'll invite the whole mailing list. So John was on that. I met him at the show, and he said that this painting was a masterpiece and stuff. And then we spoke about like visiting his studio and stuff. And then we didn't get around to it until I bumped into him. Like, I don't know if he remembers this, but I bumped into him on 125th Street. And I was like, hey, John, remember me? And then he gave me his card, and then we ended up going to his studio. We ended up doing like 4 casts in total, but yeah.
So you were familiar with John's work, but you were familiar with it from his sculptures in the South Bronx Hall of Fame, or did you become familiar with his work when you met at the gallery?
So where his studio is, like, I live like 6 or 7 blocks away, and I grew up in that neighborhood. But I actually never knew of John's work until that day. Like this guy that used to work with me told me like, hey, that's John Ahearn. He's like a legend. So I Googled spot, and I looked at all his sculptures, and I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And then we ended up speaking like 3 minutes later after I did my research on the spot. But yeah, we became friends later.
That's wonderful. I think not many people have the experience of sitting for a portrait. And this reminds me actually of the unveiling of the Obama portraits at the National Portrait Gallery, where former First Lady Michelle Obama said exactly those words, that it was she said, well, no one from my family has ever been in a portrait, and this is a new experience, and it speaks to a new consciousness in the art of portraiture, of bringing forward people who have not been traditionally represented. And I think your practice, Devon and John, your artistic practice really goes against that elitist tradition of portraiture to celebrate and to highlight for you, Devon, city dwellers, the people who make New York thrive, you know, the many different people who ride the subway from their home to their jobs, or, you know, to visit friends, whatever, you know, their transit might be through the city, you depict them. And then for you, John, it's the many people who make community, who build communities in the different parts of New York City and beyond, really, because your work also transcends New York. And by now you have also made portraits of each other. I want to give a little bit of more context here and show more of your work. John, perhaps you want to talk a little bit about this slide?
My favorite photograph by Christoph Kohlhofer, and it was this was 1979, and it's an important summer for me because I was an artist in residence at the new Fashion Moda that was on 3rd Avenue in the Bronx, and I can't point at this. You see the young man with a strong arm with a very short t-shirt. That's Rigoberto Torres, and he had just, thank you, and he had just started coming to the sessions that I was doing casting every day at Fashion Moda, and we started working together. And behind him is Stefan Eins and Joe Lewis, the two co-directors. And in the front is Tom Otterness, who was very interested in going with me to see Rigoberto Torres' uncle's statuary factory, which was not very far away from there. And we looked at the ways of making statues. And in the back, you see what we were doing was assembling the cast and calling it the South Bronx Hall of Fame. And there were always people coming in and asking, what are you doing to that person? You know, I think that's all.
Right. And you see more or less what you're doing. There's a person there covered in plaster, and you're going to see more of that in a few,
yes,
down the PowerPoint in a few images from now. But let me continue showing you more of John and Devon's work.
This is a social event. That's what the Fashion Moda thing I should have. Thank you for showing this wonderful Martha Cooper photograph. It's so beautiful. She went to the day after the Double Dutch was installed at Kelly Street in the Bronx. She went there and talked to these 4 girls that were out in front and found that they were the same 4 girls that were in the statue. And she asked them to show her how they did the Double Dutch together. So you see the 4 girls of right there who all 4 lived in that same building. And it's a beautiful thing to see that.
It's a fantastic photograph.
So Devon.
And now, yes, I wanted to also give you a glimpse of Devon's practice, which is also very much tied to the city, as I was saying, to the city of New York. I think many of us probably who are connected to this program right now have seen his, are followers of his on Instagram and on TikTok. He's really a TikTok sensation and has become very well known for his fantastic portraits, quick portraits of people riding the subway. And this is one of them.
Amazing.
They're quite magical. They're mesmerizing. I watch them over and over again. Devon, do you want to say something about those portraits?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So the everyday people thing. I started when I was like 15 or 14, and it wasn't like I didn't think of it as like everyday people as a concept. It was just me, like on my way to school. I was in the South Bronx going to school in Midtown Art and Design High School, and it was just on my commute, and I was always like a people watcher, and like I would always people and notice how like, me coming from my neighborhood going to Midtown, like how the demographics of the people would change like past like 86th Street. It's like a whole different set of backgrounds and stuff. So I would always like watch people, and it was just hand in hand with what I love to do. I just love to draw, and I just love portraiture. So, it was like the good thing to do. And then everybody like fell in love with the subway idea, and then I started taking it to doing oil paintings, and I would take photographs of people and do like full on oil paintings of people. And then recently during so these are my oil paintings that I would like, I took these like much more serious, and I learned how to oil art and design. So these were like works that took like maybe like a month or maybe a little bit more, over a month. So but I recently got back to the drawing thing. I guess we could get into that later, or I can speak about it now if you want.
And I love the different ways in which you treat the mediums, and also the difference between the portraits from that first one that we've seen here in the slideshow, The City Sleeps, the city that never sleeps, but you have the two passengers who are sleeping and the other one immersed in her book. And then these ones, which are a lot more detailed, and also those quick drawing videos, which are quite mesmerizing because of the whole process that is captured in them, from your compositional scheme into that, all those tiny details of the garments, of the hair, the individual style of the people.
Yeah. So I like always start my work off very like loose, and then I build it up to get tighter and tighter, and people are mesmerized by that, but it just makes it easy. It's just easier on me, because if I go straight into detail, I'm gonna like mess up. So I have to rough it in and make sure I got everything proportions right and stuff, and I don't always get it perfect. But these paintings, I actually love these way more than the one that John loved. I think back then I was I was 17. So those were like I thought the one he loves, I thought it was like super like amateur. Maybe that's why he liked it, because it wasn't like a full on like thing. These are like 2 years later. All I did was paint. Like all I did was paint every single day. That's all I thought about, and it's probably still what I think about. These are 2 years later, where my technique got much more refined and just tighter, and I was more like observant of react. The other one has like flatter like shapes, and yeah, I could knowing John, I could see why he loves it so much. Yeah.
Okay, are you always game for posing for each other? And you can go ahead and explain what this photograph is.
Well, I'm relating this to what we saw earlier at Fashion Moda in 1979, when we were doing this in a storefront window, and people were always coming in and saying, "What happened? Is that person okay?" And so there's a little bit of a monstrous quality to the activity that gets people intrigued, or let's say concerned about how the person is breathing and everything. And so this is actually the cast. One of the two casts that was in the Outwin show is right here, that we see it being made here. So it was pretty loosely done, that you get the straws in place. Hopefully they don't pull out, and I think my friend Kevin, who was helping me, took this picture while we were doing the work. And that's all. Thank you.
How does that feel, Devon?
No, I just want to say, I think, yeah, Kevin took this photo, but I told Kevin to take this photo because you never know, we might be on a panel one day, so take this photograph. But yeah, no, it felt like, I think this is my first one, and it almost feels like I could see how people would be afraid and want to jump out because it almost feels like you're drowning, but you just have to like keep the mindset that like you're gonna be okay. But it takes a lot of like willpower and mental strength to be like immersed in this thing, and then it kind of like heats up. Like I think you get out around like 20 minutes or 30 minutes, and anyway, you really have to like tell yourself everything's gonna be okay. You're not gonna die. Like, but can you hear me? It says my internet is unstable. Okay, but yeah, you just breathe through the straws. You just have to remember like the straws are gonna save your life, so it's okay.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's very like meditative. Like you just have to stay quiet.
I try to pass it off as fun with people if I can get away with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've seen you casting people.
They're going to survive or that they won't die or anything like that.
Yeah, I know you put music and everything, and so
enjoyable.
Okay.
Yeah,
so by now,
John, along the way. Oh, I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead.
I was gonna say along the way, John tells you like, this looks great, everything's okay, you're doing perfect. So you know, like, all right, I'm not gonna die. John's here.
He reassures you through the process. So by now, you've made multiple portraits of each other, and you've actually exhibited them together, right?
Yes.
At least on one occasion, is that right?
At the Bronx Art Space, we did a second. No, it was our first time showing together, but it was the same time Devon originally had shown for the portrait show. And Devon had actually asked me in advance. He told me about his father's tattoo, and I knew his father had died. And he asked me if I were interested in doing a piece about the arm that had his father's tattoo on it. Of course, I'm interested. You know, I won't get an opportunity the rest of my life to do this. You know, so. And the other one is more like I was asking Devon to do a portrait of me. Of course, as usual, he never listens to a word that I tell him. And I always give him instructions as to what I want him to do. And we were supposed to go on a very crowded train together. And he was to photograph me in the midst of crowds of people on all sides, right? Is that right, Devon?
Yeah.
It's a beautiful portrait. In all humility, I have to say that at the show that we were in together, his portrait was on one wall and mine of him was on the other wall. And everybody loved the portrait of me. And no one said anything about his portrait that I did. Isn't that right? Very quiet about it. So, but the portrait of me was, everybody freaked out about it. But I wanted to improve it by smiling a little bit, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Anyways.
So did you stand by your portrait all day? And you're wearing that same hat today.
Yes, I am wearing the same hat so that you can see. Yes.
Yeah, and Devon, so this sculpture by John of Devon's father's last tattoo, there's multiple casts of it. Is that right?
Well, I made a mold from the original one so that I could make one for him and one for me. And originally it really was for Devon to make for himself, but I got myself in there I got so excited about the image. And I had been working for a whole week on you see the arm that's missing? That is the right arm. I had been working for a week on that, trying to figure it out how to do it so that it would all fit in properly. And Devon came and said, just cut it off. And I said, wow, that's so deep. And I cut it off, and I liked the piece so much better. It kind of opened everything up. And it also gave a strangeness to it, of that hand looked so much stronger without the arm attached to it. Thank you, Devon, for all your contributions.
Yeah, of course.
And I was experimenting of doing it with no skin color on his face. And I like it so much more. I have another version that has skin color, but I like it better without the skin color. Mm-hmm. What do you think, Devon?
I love them both, but I'm very like I'm less creative than John, so I like the skin tone more, but it's John's.
I keep telling Devon that I will offer him the one that has skin color. I will give it to him right now if he will agree to give me back the one that I gave him that wasn't painted, but he just has to do the drawing on the arm for me. That's all, and then it's done. And then we're done with our collaboration.
So you made the drawing on the arm, Devon. I wanted to ask you that.
Not yet. Oh, okay.
The tattoo itself.
Yeah, okay. So wait, before that, I wanted to mention that, so we were going to be in the show together, and John was going to submit this painting with my father's last tattoo. And I remember he told me about his father's hunting coat. So I was like, you know what, we could like keep the other sub. So, you know, he wore this coat, and then, right, this is your father's coat from like a long time ago.
Yeah, it's 70 years ago.
Yeah, from 70 years ago. So, you know, I captured him in these clothes, and I told him to wear the same thing. I told him to wear the same outfit with the hat to the show, just so I could get this photograph, you know, just in case we might be on a panel one day. But, yeah. So the father's tattoo thing. My father did this tattoo of like a Japanese. It's a Japanese Hanya mask.
Pull up your sleeve. Yeah. That's it.
So this was the we were at a show one day, and this is how I pulled it up, you know, and it was like that same split second moment, like, oh, I want to capture that, you know, me doing that, and then we did that cast. But my dad was a tattoo artist, and you know, in the South Bronx, everybody knew. He left me when I was like 4 or 5 years old, and I finally got to meet him in 2015, and he did the tattoo on me of the Japanese demon, and he's been tattooing for 25 years. That was his last tattoo he's ever done in his whole career, and then he ended up soon after passed away. So that was like a last possession that I had, and then, you know, we just captured in the sculpture, and yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I do love. Oops, sorry.
Your dad.
Oh yeah, he's
unlike Devon, who's a total.
Yeah, he actually had the same one that he tattooed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Wonderful.
He had the same Hanya mask on his own, like on his left hand.
Oh, wow.
I was saying my father like tattooed the same mask on his left hand because, you know, he was a crazy person, so he just like did the same thing on his hand. Like, so he did the same one on me. But yeah.
That's beautiful. I wonder if we would like to open it to questions from the audience. Do we have, I think Paige is moderating this part.
We don't have any questions in the Q&A box yet, but for all of our attendees, the Q&A is open, and you can type in your questions, and I will read them to our panelists, and we can kind of open up for discussion. I can kind of get it started, but I'm curious about, oh, actually, we do have a question that just kind of popped up. This one comes from Alicia, and she asks, what is next for both of you? I guess whether it's new projects you're working on or your relationship, what do you see as being next?
Devon, you Johnson, go first so I could have to think more.
I'm just next.
Next, all right, I'll go.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just gonna actually I'm lost. But I'm gonna just doing the same thing for now. And I'm working on other things like, you know, my YouTube channel and stuff, just social media stuff that's like not art related. Yeah, that's all.
I want to say my answer to the question is to explain something about how I work. I never liked the idea of finding people to cast and choosing people that I thought were interesting. I never approved of that. I always wanted to be embedded in a and freely know everyone, publicly know them, and respond to how people were interested to have casts for themselves. So I like to kind of fantasize that I was doing a service for people, and that I was also I was inspired by people's enthusiasm to make things for myself as well. So it was very much a needy situation, and it was really never about choosing anybody that was either beautiful or ugly or nice or mean or anything. It was just I like to say that the interest in the person developed as we were working together. It wasn't like I had to know them a lot in advance. It was more like the knowing part happened as part of the casting process. Like, for example, I cast Rigoberto Torres for the first time within 40 minutes of having met him on the street. But I knew by the time we were casting that he would be a permanent life partner. Yes, that's true. I did. So sometimes you learn from the experience of casting. So therefore, I don't know in advance what's going to happen next week. That's my answer.
Devon, I wonder, based on John's relationships that he develops with people as he's casting them, do you feel a similar way as you're drawing somebody or painting somebody, or because of the transient nature of your work, do you not get that chance to kind of build a relationship with someone if you're just seeing them kind of in passing?
Yeah, no, I never, for the most, to know them ever. Most of them don't even know that there's a portrait of them floating around somewhere in somebody's home. But yeah, no, I only sometimes they'll find out, you know, like through social media or something. But for the most part, I never get to know them. And yeah, I don't know. I kind of think it's more interesting that way. That like I just capture somebody and dedicated a whole like the paintings, like a whole month into painting them, you know, every detail, and they never find out. I don't know. I just think there's something cool about that. I mean, except like only one time, like this woman found out through like the New York Times, and she was so upset about it. But for the most part, everybody's like honored. I've had like maybe like 12 people tell me that, you know, like, oh, I'm so honored, and then one person.
Devon, can I say something about your situation? I know no one asked me to speak on your behalf, but here's the thing: is that I have to struggle so hard for. I'm kind of like an outsider with very little cred, and I think that you bring so much to the relationship in terms of your personal experience of having brought up here in New York. You really know so much about the life around you that you don't need to prove anything to anyone about the meaning of the work. It shows in the paintings have so much depth to them and so much understanding of the humanity, and you do very well handling sort of regular middle class people as you see them in New York. They look very natural to you, but it's obvious that you're observing them with a lot of understanding.
Yeah.
That's all.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm always like thinking about people and like how they grew up, how they interact with others, and it's not like a even though they're strangers and I don't like know them, you know, I have like my own like judgments or like thoughts, and you know, it's not like a mindless thing, but um yeah, I'm glad I don't have to like come up with meaning because that's not like my strong suit. I just like love to paint and draw, and then I'm not good with like the speaking, which I always told John he's like a master at it. So I got to learn from him. No.
He never listens to a thing that I say ever. He's not eager to learn from me. I am learning from him, you know? Yes.
I want to jump into a couple of other questions that we've gotten from some of our attendees. I think, Devon, you kind of answered this a little bit, but Lynn asks, do you need permission of the people on the subway when you exhibit a painting of them? And then she also writes, P.S. I grew up in the South Bronx. But it sounds like no.
Yeah, no, I never, well, at first I did it without even caring whether like, you know, it mattered, like if it was legal or not. And then, you know, as like I started, because I used to do it for fun as like 15, 16, 17 years old. And then, you know, as my social media started growing, people were like, yo, what are you doing? Like, you could go to jail. Or I'm like, can I? So I like researched it. And, you know, people like, they have cases of like street photographers like selling their work and winning the case and stuff, like getting sued. So if they're in public, you know, you're allowed to like photograph, and then a painting is like an interpretation of the photograph. So it's not like the direct person. But yeah, I've had like one person like threaten to sue me and stuff, but everything has been fine. Some people like in my program, you know, get upset that I don't get consent, but I think for me, like the art of it is like beyond, you know, the little like weirdness of doing that, you know, like I see people's concerns, but I think that the painting, you know, ends up being more like I have to sacrifice for the art, you know, like I'm sorry, like to like some people's feelings, but you know, I kind of the art goes beyond it, I think, but yeah.
And I guess to that question, I have another question from Roger. He asks, how do you get the photo without them reacting to being photographed? Is there a way that you kind of do it clandestinely?
I used to have like a really nice professional camera but it was kind of like bulky and it would make like that click noise. So I would get caught like way more with that. But over the years, like when I first started doing it, I think I had an iPhone 5 where the camera, it's all right, but it's not good enough for a painting. So I like didn't go with that. But over the years, the iPhone camera got so much better. So now I just pretend, you know, everyone's on their phone. You know, like in most of my drawings, you see everyone's on their phone. So I'm just like a kid on his phone and like pretending like I'm texting and I like just like take it without them notice.
Right.
You know, I don't get caught anyway. I'm very sneaky.
It's easier with technology.
Yeah.
This next question is for the both of you. This one comes from Anne and she asks, why portraits? As simple as that.
Speaking for myself, I was originally a landscape artist. And but when I came to New York, there was no more landscapes to be had. And I was immediately drawn to the subways in New York when I arrived here in the mid-early 70s. And I loved riding the trains and seeing everybody. And I felt like I wanted to be part of what was going on here in New York. So that's why I did portraits. It was a way of relating to people.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I like came up doing graffiti and you know, I always loved portraits, but I didn't have like the skill level at the time. But I always loved like documentaries on people, like profiles of people. I always loved like thinking about people and their lives and stuff. but I didn't have like the skill set until like I went to the high school of art and design. And then I really got into portraiture. But you know, even growing up, like seeing like the guys on Times Square and drawing people, I was always fascinated by that. So it just like naturally led to that. And then, you know, just the funnest part is just choosing you know, who I'm gonna be, and yeah.
Right. I have one more question, and it comes from two separate people, but they're both curious about the size of some of Devon's paintings.
Most of them are 40 by 30 inches, some smaller, but maybe like 90% of them are 40 by 30. Yeah, it's just like working, you know, that size. And it's, they take so long, so I don't want to go any bigger. They take so long to do, especially like there's like a subway map in it, or it depends on what they're wearing. But yeah, the subway, I don't think I'm gonna do another one ever.
Vermeer.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Look at what he was doing. He set these problems of doing these maps and everything, right?
Right.
Yeah. I can't.
All right. I think that's all the questions we have. Unless anybody has last minute questions, now's your chance to pop them into the Q&A box. But I want to thank all three of you for being here and for having this wonderful conversation.